Hello, everybody. Welcome to the July 9th Crowbar Design Meeting. We have a huge agenda of stuff to cover, so I was going to have us give some brief updates of where we stand, and then talk through design updates and try to focus on things that are move into resolving issues that are immediately tripping people up, and we'll just push forward things that don't make it. Okay. Victor, do you want to do an update on where you are on the stuff you did?
Yeah, so last night my kid woke me up at 2 in the morning and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I started working more on WSMAN code that I've been working on for the last few days. And I finally got to the point where the pull request that I have out for just doing power management via WSMAN is actually using the native Ruby OpenWSMAN bindings. So it's not calling out to Whistle or WSMAN CLI or any of those other tools to talk WSMAN at the servers that support it. It's actually using the native Ruby bindings and talking via the OpenWSMAN libraries, which is a good foundation for building on more WSMAN work, when we start actually getting into talking to the lifecycle controller on Dell boxes to flash RAID and flash the firmware and manage the RAID controllers and mess around with BIOS settings and that sort of thing. So, yay, progress. Rob, you said you were testing that pull on physical hardware. How far did you get?
I actually got a complete cycle on it. So I was able to demonstrate that it powers things on and off, and the lights blink when you ask the lights to blink. And I also tested against a virtual machine, because I'm trying to make sure that the WSMAN calls don't interrupt our flow on virtual.
They won't.
And they don't. So, and I think I spun up a whole bunch of Docker nodes against the thing too. So yeah, it looks pretty good for that. Oops, somebody's trying to call it. Oh, yeah, we're doing a Crowbar.
So that's where we stand with WSMAN right now. The reason Jeff got so excited was, or not Jeff, but sorry, I've only had my first cup of coffee today. The reason Rob got so excited was I started talking about future directions with using WSMAN to do out-of-band management on things like BIOS settings and RAID controllers, and talking about things where if we get things set up right, we can actually do late binding on disk for disks, so we don't actually configure a RAID 10 for all of your Docker containers until we actually deploy the I want a Docker container role and do sort of crazy stuff like that. But those are future directions that I'm probably not going to implement the first time around. First time around, it'll probably look a lot like Crowbar 1, where you can decide what your RAID config looks like beforehand.
So the conversation that we ended up going
unless someone wants to, jump in and help me out with the coding.
This is going to be a full hour architectural discussion in the future, because the way I summarized it, and I think Victor would be more nuanced, but the way I summarized it was that our current disk node role really is an inventory node role, and it figures out what you've got, and we're going to allow you to sort of immediately, assuming you have an inventory, make some decisions. But you have to make those assumptions before you can really do anything. What we'd like to be able to do is treat disks more like assets and have disk roles downstream, so that you could add a disk role, build a RAID set for an OS, or build a cache disk for a Ceph deployment, rather than doing it all the way back at the beginning of the chain.
Yeah, for those of you that are familiar with how networking in Crowbar works, it'd be kind of like how we do late binding with your network layout. In Crowbar, we don't actually create custom interfaces that do tag VLANs and such. So we could do a similar thing with disks. But only if we're doing it out of band. And there's a series of architectural trade-offs that we have to talk about to make sure that all the crazy stuff I just talked about also doesn't make it impossible to do inbound disk management, because we're going to need that for everything that, we can't just talk to the RAID controller directly without being in the operating system or having to boot into Sledgehammer to use Mega CLI or that sort of thing.
Because we don't have the utilities to run natively under the OS to do that.
We probably do these days. I think the situation has improved since we did things initially, and that you can reliably run Mega CLI on all the common distros. But still, Mega CLI is a gigantic pain in the ass, especially if you're trying to script it and do things that impotently.
I don't know exactly how to capture all this, but it's worth understanding that, I think we've got a short-term workaround. If you're used to Crowbar 1, basically, before you install the OS, you have to make a whole bunch of disk provisioning decisions. And with true out-of-band management, we can actually do things even after the OS is up, or we can do things at different stages.
Do things while the OS is running.
It can get really scary. And we can do things while the machine is off also. This is a whole new level of capability. We're going to have to talk through how it impacts us.
Yeah.
But I love being able to sit down next to that box and actually have it spin up or spin down. It's compared to Crowbar 1, which is sort of magical. It's really nice to be able to get that stuff going.
Once again, we are two years ahead of everybody else, and even harder for people to see.
Yeah, I know. Well,
the more awesome we make, the more intimidating it becomes.
I think that this remote power piece should be pretty straightforward to explain.
Well, and these days the remote power thing is pretty standard. I mean, Ironic has the capability. They even wrote their own native IPMI junk in Python, but they're talking LAM Plus straight at the IPMI controllers to do it. And I believe ROX has this capability, and anything that's talking to VMs instead of physical hardware also has this capability because it's talking to the hypervisor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from that perspective, it takes you closer to a virtualized infrastructure.
Yeah.
Without band management. Sure. Let's gloss over that topic for a minute.
And I know what is the name of it? Not clouds, but the other thing that uses a bunch of machines.
Hadoop? No,
not Hadoop. Not cloudy things. Hadoop is a cloudy thing.
HPC?
Yes, those people. Okay. They're also crazy, and they wrote Free IPMI, which is an entire suite of IPMI management tools that's oriented around having one command reboot 100 machines at once.
Oh, wow. Anything to be able to do?
Yeah.
So the ready state wizard, I made
merged that last night.
You did. Ready state it's not attached to the UI, but it's working. So the thing to do, I have a.
I have a question.
Please.
Victor, what is the state of the on-LOM IPMI stuff that's out there now? The Atmel processor. How much memory do those things have today? Have they gone up to 128K now?
I don't know and don't really care.
Are you asking?
They're programmable.
Yeah, as long as they talk the IPMI protocol, and I can configure them, I don't really care how they talk. I don't really care where they sit.
It means that we can repurpose
For what?
For out-of-band control purposes.
That's the whole point of an IPMI controller.
I'm missing, John. You're bringing that up for a reason, and I'm missing.
No, I was just wondering if we can take advantage of that.
Right now, if we detect that you're running on an iDRAC, we switch the LAN interface over to dedicated mode. Otherwise, we don't. We just leave it at whatever it was. So you can set it up to run over shared. So if it's running on shared mode and it doesn't have dedicated NIC interface, it's going to keep shared NIC mode.
Interesting.
Which means that the board you ordered where the HMI is shared, it should just work. Cool. Let me know if it doesn't, and I'm sure you will.
Oh, you're out of town the same week I am.
Yeah.
So the Ready State wizard merged. We included the changes from the planning session, so it actually shows you, and it's really handy, it shows you the hardware and the configuration as part of that list. So I'm going to snap a video of it because I want to do the power management things and show that. And then I'll do a pull that actually brings it into the UI. The other thing is that the Travis CI is nearly complete for BDD. So what I have working with Travis CI will on the scripts that I've been working will install Crowbar, run the website, and bring it up, and then it will. So here's doing migration, and then it actually runs. The website hits, and then it will fail the BDD test because I have something misconfigured. But running and failing all the BDD tests is
that's progress.
That I'm not far.
That's better than running and passing because the only test we have is true.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, it does pass the BDD test because I don't have that final error does not result in it.
Just do set that sheet in the script. It'll blow up the moment it runs into an error.
Yeah. But so a lot of progress on that. So I'm hoping by by the planning session we will actually have gated check-ins that have a true smoke test.
Cool. And then we need to work out a strategy to make them work against non-core repos.
Yes. I think based on what I've learned about Travis, that will be pretty manageable.
Okay.
Very manageable. Okay. So I'm going to pause. And the other one was actually I wanted feedback on this. So Meshius did a pull against Crowbar that does this.
Alternating lines.
The alternating lines. And I wanted to get people's feedback about it to say, yes, do it or don't do it. So the idea here is alternating lines looks like this. You have a table and the lines alternate. And we have a couple of places where we want that. But for the most part, we don't do it.
What is it?
So his pull request basically turns on the alternating lines CSS so that a table is displayed having white and gray bars. Which is, I'm trying to think of where we have that in some places. We don't. So most of these screens, we don't do alternating bars. We just do a big table. And then when you hover, you get a highlight on that row.
I think alternating bars in general are better as long as you're selling them.
Easy to read.
From a UI perspective, I believe it's better to have that type of color contrast. It helps line up things when there's a lot of data on the screen.
Well, for instance, looking at GitHub, there's their table there. Every line is alternating lines every time.
Okay.
I mean, that's the reason that the old fanfold paper for mainframes was, white and green, white and green bar paper.
And my Dungeon Master's Guide definitely had that in all its tables.
Oh, yeah.
That is true, it does.
All right.
So we'll give this gentleman a +3 in intelligence for proposing this change.
I had a technical nit that I'm still waiting on a pull to address. So yes, good. This is what my hope was. I've talked to Meshius, and to do general cleanups on the UI is a generally good thing. And So one of the things I would ask for the next planning session, if there are UI screens that are worrisome from that perspective, I know that he's willing to take suggestions on which screens to attack or what screens are needed to be built. And we should plan on bringing that up in the next session.
Yeah, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The workflow in the UI is still difficult.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's more than just cleaning up a screen here, there, and the other place. Right. What we need to do is evaluate what the use case flow should be through the user interface.
I think that I would love to see a proposal for that. I think the Ready State Wizard is going to help. I hope that it helps with that a fair bit because it takes away a lot of the pieces. But even if it means a total revamp, Scott, let's put some suggestions on the table.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing where we need to a front-end, back-end architecture where the UI is a separate thing from the API layer. Might come in handy.
Could very well.
But that's long-term. That's not the immediate future.
And I think at some point we're going to need to say this is the UI of the OpenCrowbar project, and some of what we're describing would be funded UI development.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the balance. This UI needs to be good enough for people to accomplish the basic goals and get a cluster running to a certain size.
Well, frankly, at the scale that we're probably going to be talking about, that scale we really want to run at, I think a lot of the users will be a lot more comfortable dealing with it in terms of the APIs than they will in terms of what.
I think the way we use the UI is going to be very different, right? You're going to have a lot more 20-foot display type UI, meaning you see a big cluster of nodes. You don't do much to them. I agree. So I'd love to have some funds to actually invest in a real UI design now that we actually understand get the 100-node challenge behind us and really see how the UIs are breaking. Because I guarantee they will. So next, I don't know how much further we want to go on the impact of the WSMAN API pieces, except to say that we're going to have, there will be some design consequences. Do you want to explain the out of band, trying to think of how to even ask the question to make it an easy to explain thing.
We run into a lot of that in Crowbar.
Yeah. So to do out-of-band management, you make out-of-band calls. Right now, those are synchronous calls that Victor and I were talking about a little bit beforehand. And there's a pattern now for doing these out-of-band calls. Can you talk through some of the design thought that you have for out-of-band versus in-band and how you're managing that?
Well, it's not so much out-of-band versus in-band management as I think is at some point we're going to need just a general to generalize the chunk I hacked in to add an abstraction layer for how to manage power on a system into a more general how to manage nodes outside of the context of node roles. Because ultimately doing things like not necessarily messing around with the BIOS settings, but changing the boot order on a node and turning the node on and off and making it blink and doing that sort of thing, that ultimately is something that lies outside of the context of walking the node role graph to convert a node to a desired state. And that's why I consider that to be out-of-band management, because it's out of band from the normal cluster maintaining its state operations.
Yeah, I still don't think it's clear. Can you define the difference between what you mean around out-of-band and in-band?
Oh, yeah.
Is it from where the action is being performed?
Kind of. I mean, right now, when I'm talking about out-of-band versus in-band. So, like, an in-band action on a node is like an in-band action is like deploying a database on a node. You have a node role that's bound to it that says, I want to deploy Postgres, and the jig eventually comes along after, annealing the cluster and discovers that it needs to install Postgres, and it does it. And that's part of the flow of, bringing a cluster up to whatever state you want to bring it up to. However, out of band is doing things like, I want to reset the node. It doesn't affect it may have effects on the node role state graph, or on the node role graph, because all the node roles on that node have to be moved out of active when you do it. It's ultimately not something that is always going to be under the control of the Crowbar framework. The ultimate arbiter of whether or not the node is on and off is either the power company or the sysadmin, depending on how far back you want to take it. And whether or not a node is turned on and off or what it boots to is something that Crowbar can manage, but it's not the only thing that can manage it.
What about network? So when we talk about network, a switch configuration for a port, the switch itself is a node from that perspective and has management. Would you consider a port configuration of the switch to be out of band for the node? That's a little bit mind-numbing.
It'd be out of band for the node that it is connected to. It wouldn't be out of band for the switch that the port owns.
Wow.
It'd be
It
in band for that.
depends on how the switch can. So you're not saying, when you say out of band, you're not necessarily just meaning that it goes through an API that's outside of the OS, or are you?
I am not saying, I do not mean that it just goes through an API that's outside of the OS.
I think the definition of out of band is a fairly critical one here, Victor.
Yeah.
Certainly in AMD, the definition of out of band was that you had the ability to exercise control on power switched off to the device.
Well, that matters on a device-by-device statement, but I'm thinking of in-band and out-of-band in terms of whether or not the node role graph is the thing that is the active traversing the node role graph is the thing that is responsible for doing the action to it.
Yeah, but there are things that in the node role graph being done could be done out of band. So.
Yeah, it's ultimately an arbitrary choice there.
Right. The jig might choose to do what you're saying, out of band actions.
Maybe, Rob, if you would define what you mean by an out-of-band action.
So from my perspective, I was thinking out of band means that it's not done directly through the OS of the system. So you don't log into the node or talk to the chef agent on the node to take the action. It's done by an API call to external hardware or something like so. An IP. So using the BMC network to configure the RAID is out of band. Using the Mega CLI on the system itself to configure the RAID would be in band, and that was my definition. It's the control.
That would be my definition as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be largely happy with that.
So I'll need to think of a different set of terms for the concept that I have in mind. Okay.
So
yeah, and I think I get where you're getting at, Victor. I think that what was confusing me is out-of-band management is a term that's thrown around a lot in the industry, and it's typically meant to enact actions on a subsystem of a piece of hardware, right? So a LILO or an iDRAC or something like that to affect changes on the system. Those actions are, orchestrated external to the system and pushed to it.
Yeah, and kind of the concept that I had in mind, like, for instance, a sysadmin logging onto a system and using Mega CLI to blow away a RAID array in the operating system for a system that's managed by Crowbar would be considered out of band from the point of view of Crowbar.
Right. So basically, there are very few things that would be in band under that definition. In other words, someone could always log into a system as root and retract some of the actions that the configuration utility is put in place. Right,
and the concept I had in mind was more in-band is when the Crowbar framework does it as part of bringing the cluster to whatever desired state we wanted it to be in, and out-of-band was everything else.
Gotcha.
But I'll need to find new terms for that.
Because some of what you're saying is those actions could actually be in-band actions from the way I would describe it.
Yeah, they totally could be.
So we sort of,
Like we could reboot a node by SSH intoing and saying reboot, or we could reboot a node by poking at the IPMI controller and saying reset.
Like the switch.
Yeah.
Or you could poke at a powered PDU and reboot it that way.
Yep.
Yep. So I think that part of what, and so part of this is understanding the node role state graph better, because really what Victor is describing to me are distinctions between state operations in the node role graph and point actions, if you will, synchronous point actions.
Yeah.
We need to come up.
Benefit of terms for that.
And so if you're not enmeshed, if you're on this call and not enmeshed in the nuances that this is the call where we talk about the nuances to try and understand them better, and then we talk about the details of the work that is being planned in the next meeting. So this is a very topical conversation for us to try and resolve lexical issues.
Yeah, I'm still having trouble understanding actions that are not considered part of the node role graph.
Well, like powering on a node. Where's the node role for that? Will there ever be one?
It's a weird mix because
Or for that matter, activating a service or functionality that's not germane to the node role graph.
so.
Well, it depends on.
Can we talk about this as nouns and verbs? I mean, is that useful? The node role graph is it's basically nodes or nouns, a whole bunch of I am this, I am this, I am this, and some of what we're talking about are verbs. The problem is the jigs actually execute. Their job is to go from this noun to that noun, right? I am a raw machine. I am a OS provision machine, and so they take action. Not that simple.
Yeah, I don't want to get.
I'm trying to go meta help Judd.
Well,
words on this.
one question is, if a node was powered off explicitly by Crowbar, does Crowbar track that state? So, or to put it another way, if a node's not turned on, is there a difference between Crowbar knowing it's not turned on and the node just like not responding and Crowbar not sure of its state?
Crowbar does not make that distinction. The distinction Crowbar makes is the node alive or not, which pretty much boils down to can I ping it and SSH into it.
Yep. So that means.
And that's really all that I want the core framework to track.
Yeah. And to me, that makes sense. And it means that in the case of a node that's powered off explicitly, it's not really a role. The node happens to be in that state, but Crowbar is not tracking that state, other than knowing it's not there for some reason.
I mean, via the power stuff, you can ask whether or not it's on or off, but the core framework doesn't know or care whether or not a system is on or not. All it cares about is it alive and doing things, and can I reach out and control it or not?
But it is, once we know about a node, we do track whether it's on or off.
No, we don't. We do not track whether it's on or off. We only track whether or not we can control it.
which people would infer power state, but there's a lot of things that could be interfering with it. Even network
power state is just one of the conditions.
It is a very critical distinction because live or not can also be shit, the switch caught on fire.
Or somebody unplugged my network, or
I
feel like we're having some fun with this, but
So is there a metagraph that we need to deal with here?
what do you mean?
Well, we have a node state transition graph for all the critical functionality that we are trying to maintain. But we also have environmental factors that we may elect to monitor and transition that is not germane to the...
I have no interest in modeling infinite graphs.
If it impacted the system, we could extend the node graph to make that part of it.
Well, if it impacted it and we knew we could have control over it.
Yeah, true. Control ends up.
If it's external events that we ultimately have no control over, I'm not really interested in putting that in the graph.
No, but it would be nice to have external events that actually mark machine nodes as offline if not alive, if we knew they were not alive.
We do that. Like all the power stuff right now. If you ask Crowbar to turn the machine off, it's going to mark it as not alive.
All right. I feel like we're chasing our tail a little bit.
Yeah.
Have we gone far enough to bring up some issues that will help contextualize future discussions? Well, I said that in a very highfalutin way. Does this help us be more clear in the future?
Or did we just make everything even more confusing?
Or more muddy?
No, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, if there's different levels of sort of controllable by Crowbar, there's yes and no, whether we can control the operating system versus controlling the hardware or access to cloud provider that's providing us with instance. I hear what you're saying, Victor, about not wanting a really complicated node role graph. And if you can separate out all that sort of underlying stuff that's not actually futzing with the operating system and installing and deploying services, then that's cool. So instead of saying in band, we can say in OS or out of OS. And the stuff that's out of OS, we are not tightly coupling to the node role graph. Is that safe? Or, yeah, because to be controllable, you need SSH access.
Well, you just need access. Right now, that defaults to SSH access, but for like Windows, it'd be very easy to default to being able to poke at it via WSMAN.
Right, so do we draw a hard line between what is on the node role graph and what is not?
In my mind, the things that are on the node role graph are things that we do to bring a cluster to a certain operational state in terms of what's deployed where and how it's all configured. Things that are not on the node role graph or anything external to that, like managing the power state or ensuring that we have network connectivity 100% of the time, or any one of a huge number of potential diagnostic or monitoring tools that we might add to Crowbar in the future. Like I've been looking at console and trying to convince myself to play around with it. And I think it'd be awesome if we had console installed on all the nodes just for monitoring purposes. But the only thing that'd be on the node role graph for that would be you're going to install console on this, and here's how it's going to be configured to join its little, gossip clusters so that everything knows about everything else. But everything that we do to actually listen to that fire hose of monitoring data is outside the bounds of the node role graph.
So anything that becomes monitoring data is off the graph.
Well, monitoring data or command and control for the nodes themselves, that's off the graph.
So an example is, for example, turning off controller cards that you don't need and reducing power consumption on them.
If we go that far.
If we go that far.
Wow. See, it's funny because you guys are going deeper on the node. I'm actually thinking outwards towards how does that impact switch
You could do out-of-band switch configuration.
Well, to me, that's where the thing that gets interesting with this is switch configuration, right? We've known it's always been the biggest challenge.
Well, it's out-of-band until Crowbar grows the capability to manage switches, in which case it would turn into in-band.
So the other possibility of moving down the track.
Because, for the way that we have it right now, managing networks is in-band. It is done on the Crowbar. It is done on the node role graph.
Yes.
Right now, managing the switches, we don't do it all, so it's backed out of band.
So the network is only in band to the extent that the network is a dependency of our node roll graph.
To the extent, yes.
And we could actually configure a lot more than that.
Yes, if we had control at the top of rack and, end of row switches or whatever the next new hot data center topology is going to be.
Right.
We can make that all in band up to the point where we lose control.
There is another potential use case.
Whether or not it's a good thing to do that is an entirely different discussion.
There is another
But
potential.
we've, how much time do we have left? 20 minutes?
20 minutes, and we have other topics.
Yeah.
The purpose here is, this is the way I believe design works, is you have to bring up topics early, you have to get people primed on them, then they grok it, it's very circular. So I wanted to get this topic started. We are hitting it actively, and so we're going to keep discussing it and trying to figure out how to make it work. And I'm actively looking for people in the community. Good, thank you for adding the on-graph, off-graph. I'm looking for people in the community who want to help sponsor the switch integration work that I think we're primed to take on, because that gets really interesting. And I'm talking to some people in different networking scenarios about this. I think this is really exciting. All right.
What was that, sir?
So I have two things I definitely wanted to cover. I think we actually covered the use cases for power management, how to handle VMs. So I'm going to do that. Chef Metal, I wanted to talk through, and the
how to handle VMs?
Yes.
May I come
What
back
did you mean by
to what we
that?
were discussing before?
Which one do you want to talk about?
The out of band and out of node roll graph, transition graph scope question.
Yep.
One that is potentially of interest to us down the road is one of doing monitoring and introspection on the operation of a cluster that we are actually managing the state transition on, right, in order to determine if we need to bring up additional nodes for SLA management. So my expectation on that is that we will provide a framework that allows somebody to make those judgment calls. That what you're describing would be an add-on or a separate project on top of what we're doing, rather than Crowbar making that judgment. I'm trying to Crowbar should be really good at saying, I have a new node, spin it up. I have this node, I want it to become that, and make those things happen. Taking it to the point to make those an actual determination of whether or not it needs to do those things. That's out of band at Crowbar. That to me is
That'd be something else driving Crowbar.
Yes.
Because I can see right now I can name
we don't want to see
six
Crowbar
projects so actually let me be very specific. I would love to see, actually this ties into Chef Metal, I would love to see Ironic using Crowbar as a way to provision nodes to ready state and then take over using, delivering them into into a cloud as capacity. Chef Metal has the exact same semantic. Chef Metal, the goal for that is not to provision the nodes, it's to allocate the nodes into node roles. So the idea with Chef Metal is you're like, I need 6, how many servers do I have? I have 6. All right, turn 4 of them into this, 3 of them into that, 2 of them into that. So Chef Metal is exactly the type of tooling on top of Crowbar where we can take advantage of, I need a server that looks like this, ready state server.
We've got those flying around.
We have those.
And we've got one that we can make look like that.
And so in the last meeting, there were some questions. I'm pretty intent on spending a couple days getting Chef Metal working because I want to demo that at OSCON.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in what exactly your goal is with Chef Metal there.
So what my goal is, the Chef Metal APIs are pretty straightforward. What they do is they assume that you have a pool of available resources and that you can say, give me a server from your pool and make it mine, which basically means taking nodes from the system deployment and putting them into a Chef Metal deployment.
Okay.
and then then you can pick the OS you want on it, and that it gives you the chef. It expects the SSH keys and it installs the chef client. Although I think we might be able to install the chef client and attach it.
We do that. Yeah.
So it's a pretty straightforward API. It's really designed for clouds, but I think it's a great proof point of exactly what John was just bringing up and what we've been saying for a while. The nuance is that we also need to be able to access the chef server, and since we install one of those, I was going to open up the ports for the chef server that we've got out of the Docker admin so that we can talk to the chef server.
Just open port 443.
Yeah. So I wanted to actually start. That'll make it so that you can use chef commands like knife to actually run Crowbar infrastructure, because that's really what Chef Metal's doing. The same thing behind this. I got some pushback on that before. I think it's a reasonable amount of work, and I think it really helps the chef community get behind what we've done, as opposed to building their own Pixie infrastructure or using Razor, neither of which are very attractive alternatives in my opinion.
We'll have to see.
So that's sort of I'll actually try and scope out. I'll write up as an operator I want to this, or as a Chef Metal user I want to be able to this. I'll put together a couple of use cases. So before I go further, I'm going to keep going on it, but I'll at least write down the use cases.
Yeah, I'd prefer if we also discuss it in the list of priority of other items that we're trying to achieve.
Is there something? So this one to me, if I can get it for OSCON, it strikes me as a big win to get in front of the chef audience, which is why I've been prioritizing it. More so than say open. It's more achievable than doing OpenStack. What else would you have us do first, Scott?
Bare metal.
I don't think so. I don't think that's slowing down bare metal from that perspective. I think Victor and I are working in parallel on that, and I'm not sure I could accelerate Victor's work. Could I accelerate your work?
The next steps for me in bare metal are going to be to get that T320 that I have up to the point where I can actually install an operating system on it. And my next step with that, now that I have now that I have WSMAN up and running, is to be able to poke the RAID controller and say, give me a disk that I can install on an operating system onto.
It is. Perfect.
Yep.
Scott, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm able to validate and check Victor's stuff and unblock him on that. The Travis stuff is moving. The ready state page is moving along. The next thing that I would see on the list that is in conflict is OpenStack. I'm working on OpenStack integration.
Can you be more specific?
So the next thing I was planning to do is to go
What
back.
happened to just doing SEP?
I mean, what other items are on the Broom release cadence?
Excellent question. This is not. This is added. I do know that.
I think it's definitely reasonable to write up a proposal for what it is that you're going to try to accomplish. And get comments on that and those sort of pieces. But I think we should also make sure that we have, a reasonable prioritized list of items that we want worked.
Right.
And if it's at the top of the list, then yeah, okay, cool.
And this is why I wanted to bring it up. So let's do this. We need to go back. So in the next agenda, if somebody has access to the pad. For next week's agenda, I definitely would like to talk through this market vision roadmap. slide, so that one of the things that in conversations that occurs to me is we're very good at talking about technical things that we want to deliver, but I think as we're looking for the community to come in behind us, we need to be talking through some broad brush stroke things.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering what was up with the request for Cloud API stuff. That doesn't seem like that really fits into what we want Crowbar to do.
It's not something that I would chase, but if somebody wants to scratch an itch for it, I'll explain their use case because we have time to do that. So, Scott, for Broom, the things that we are looking at, we're in progress on IPMI RAID, we're in progress on gated CI. Upgrade is something we have not yet worked on. At some point we need to think about that. And then the other thing we were supposed to be doing is enabling workloads. Rewrite Ceph would be an alternative for that. That's a good point. So let me look at what it would take to start doing some of the dusting off the Ceph workloads.
There's a piece of core that I broke that affects the Ceph workload.
Let's work on bare metal first.
Yeah, I've deliberately been not working on that to get to a point where I can actually get an operating system on that T3.
But the other thing I've been wanting to do is bring over the OpenStack and Hadoop workloads from the master branch, from the 1x code base, or the I would call 2x, and just get that latest work in OpenCrowbar.
Yeah, they'll need the work on core that I have to do for Ceph, or that someone has to do for Ceph. If anyone wants to learn a whole lot about the node role graph and how it's built.
And so, Scott, to an extent, some of this work is good, but it's a little bit blocked on those pieces all coming together. So, bare metal is definitely the priority. And all right, we'll keep talking about it. I'll write down some things that I want to do. We have these meetings. Okay. So I want to talk about RPM install maintenance. We have people who are trying to use the RPM install.
It's failing horribly.
And it is failing probably, in minor ways. It would be really helpful to have somebody going through those steps so that we figure out what's broken with it.
The thing that's broken with it right now is no one's updating the RPMs.
That would be.
Sorry, say that again.
The thing that's broken about it right now is that nothing is updating the RPMs.
I think our friend in Australia, I believe, is Alan. Yeah. Alan is. I think he's updating them off the trunk. I haven't tested to see where they are.
Yeah, we need to talk with him more.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if somebody can aim me at a series of RPMs, I'll be happy to run through it.
Yeah,
but I need some.
Okay.
Well, the other thing is it's also very easy to generate your own RPMs locally. Pretty much you run the make RPM script that's in the build tools repo, and it just goes on.
I can start posting this to SourceForge. That is actually very easy.
No, not SourceForge.
Where do you want to
GitHub.
The S3 buckets that we have set up for this sort of thing. Because S3 is cheap.
SourceForge just aren't free. And we've got a little project.
But can I refer to SourceForge in a young metadata file?
I think you can. All right, we'll resolve this.
Yeah.
So before the next sprint, we will have a permanent location for these, and in the meantime, we'll have an intermediate location. So Scott, if you want to run through those scripts and get them to work, then we'll do that. So this I think is more planning work. We just need to do it. But I think what we're saying is we are going to commit to getting those RPMs.
Scott, what I'll do for you is I'll modify the KVM admin script to unilaterally rebuild RPMs instead of only rebuilding them on demand. And then from there, you'll just be able to run from the core, just run tool/KVM admin, and it will try to spin up and install on CentOS 5 from the RPMs.
Okay.
And if you want to hit me up offline, I'll give you more details on how that works and what the prerequisites are.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
So in planning, we're going to talk more about Chef Metal. We'll talk about theft and core blocker. This is a design meeting. If there are other items, just add them to the agenda here. This is the guy who'd been working on Iron Fan.
What's that?
It basically was a cobbler alternative. You actually met him, Daniel Elliott, his name. That guy was awesome.
Okay.
At one point, so I tried to document his use cases, and he didn't reply back. But just like we spin up Docker containers for dev test, Crowbar could talk to the Cloud API to spin up nodes that it would then manage. And so the idea is that if I'm going to start building a Ceph deployment or a Hadoop deployment, and I have a cloud available to me, I could actually spin up, a 10-node Ceph deployment like Crowbar, do all the installation, test it, get everything working, and then tear it down as part of my process, instead of spinning them up as containers or VMs on my local machine. And it seems to me that the same control path we use for Docker could be used to do Cloud API or Cloud VM spin-up.
Only if your Crowbar controller node is also in the cloud and you don't jack everything else up by running DHCP on the cloud's IP address range.
Docker doesn't rely on DHCP to do its thing, so it's conceivable.
That doesn't matter. Because when you spin up an admin node, it spins up a DHCP server. You can't not do it right now.
So your concern is that you have to have the networking to get to the cloud, because the Cloud API calls are out of band from that perspective.
True. But either you do it that way, or, well, there are three things that are the problem there. First, we won't be able to control the admin IP range, or indeed any networking on the cloud stuff at all.
What do you mean by control then?
So add new IP addresses and expect them to work.
What about IPv6?
Same thing. Most clouds don't even support IPv6 for that matter. Well, a lot of them don't even support IPv6.
So this could work against a small private cloud, is what you're saying.
This could work against a private cloud where you've taken care of ensuring that the address range that the cloud uses, internally or externally, overlaps with a cloud range that Crowbar can use internally or externally. Otherwise, it won't really work for that. We'd have to relax some restrictions that are currently embedded in the code around who is responsible for controlling networking out of box.
Didn't we have to relax those restrictions for containers?
Nope, because I run them in privileged mode.
Got it.
Yeah. The Docker stuff was never meant to be a production anything because it runs containers in privilege mode, which means it's trivial for any script kiddie running inside the container to own the physical box.
No, there's no Docker right now is a single node test dev port infrastructure only.
Yeah.
And I can't repeat that enough times.
Yeah, I did the Docker stuff mainly so I could just see how far I could make the current stuff scale on a single machine. And I got my answer to that. It's about 800 nodes before things start going haywire. Which is a good benchmark.
Wow.
But
Cool. So, I was trying to get Nathan to ask this on the list. I'm going to point him back to this small discussion so that we can go. I mean, this is back to if he has an itch that he wants to try and do it. But I think that there are interesting repercussions from Crowbar starting to manage virtual machines through clouds, managing virtual machines on nodes. Another sticky wicket.
Those are wickets that I would prefer we say we are not going to deal with those explicitly, probably for at least a year and a half.
I agree with you. Those are the domains of cloud management software.
Yeah. If you want that, talk to whatever. If you want to manage nodes, Crowbar, or if you want to manage, cloud instances, doing it through Crowbar strikes me as kind of silly.
I tried to write.
That's why OpenStack and all the other clouds have their own APIs.
I tried to write this as a test dev scenario. Because I think that's where it would make sense if I wanted to spin up. If I had a cloud I wanted to spin things up against.
Yeah. It would rely on a lot more control of the cloud than, control that you will not get if you're trying to do this on a public cloud.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, just use the cloud API to spin up Crowbar entirely inside the cloud. Should be good. That would be. But
Get an Excel 16 on Amazon and you can plug it.
well, I asked Nathan to clarify his use case so we could help. And with that, I think we've at least gone a little bit further so that we've got some additional feedback for that conversation. Hopefully we can keep it on the list, figure out where it goes. And we're out of time, so I was going to close the call. Any last comments before we close it?
This was just really helpful in terms of what's on the graph and what's off. And, clearly the whole discussion about launching virtual machines on another cloud is definitely off graph.
I would go so far as to declare it off topic.
Okay, talk to you guys soon. And thank you.
Thank you. And next call.